Welcome to Teen Up, a podcast that digs deeper into the thoughts of teenagers' mind about the wonders of the world.
If you're new here, I'm your host, Isabella.
And I'm Glenn. If you're not, welcome back.
Here is a quick disclaimer. We are two teenagers that are doing our best to research everything. However, we are not experts, so if we offend anyone or say something wrong, we want to apologize in advance. Please email us to tell us what was wrong. Thank you.
It is common to think that successful people may be able to live a happy and wealthy life like Bill Gates, Ellen DeGeneres, or Kim Kardashian. But not all people have such beautiful stories.
This week, we are going to be sharing a few successful people's stories. Alan Turing, Mary Jackson, Momofuku Ando, and my parents. Okay, so this first person, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's called Alan Turing. Have you heard of him?
No.
Okay, so he was born on June 23rd, 1912, and died on June 7th, 1954, living a lifespan of about 41, 42 years. He is British, so he started off, people noticed him because he was very talented in math and science, because, he was super smart. He was sent to private schools to study, and he basically enjoyed the process of solving new problems because he's smart. And there's one thing that surprised me was that he understood the theory of relativity at the age of 15. And of course he went to Cambridge University before he was supposed to go to college, the age that he was supposed to go to college. And he solved I don't know how to say this word, but it is a problem that was first brought up by this German mathematician called David Gilbert. This problem is talking about decision. I don't know how to explain it, but it's about computing or statistics. This problem is very hard and no one has ever solved it before, and he was able to solve it at the age of 22. So his contribution to his country was that he worked as a Briton code breaker. He worked in the government, and during World War II, he deciphered the Enigma machine. Do you know what the Enigma machine is?
No.
So the Enigma machine is the machine that the Germans used to put in codes to communicate with each other. It would include messages like which boat would be where and what boats are they going to attack. So if British people are able to know what the Germans are saying, they're able to win the war. But this Enigma machine has up to, I think it was 159 trillion code patterns, or more than that. Anyways, it was impossible for people to do it, by hand. So Alan Turing, he made his own machine. It took him quite a while, and people didn't really understand him, didn't understand what he was doing. Why was he building this machine that is taking forever to build? But he just kept on going. And of course, people thought of him as weird. Oh, and he wasn't able to communicate with people very well because he understands things too literally. So he has social communicating issues a little bit. So people didn't understand him or what he was doing. So because he deciphered the Enigma machine, the war was able to end 2 years earlier and saved about 14 million lives that was going to die during the war.
Wait, was he in our history class?
I don't know.
Maybe it's someone else.
Anyways, that was his contribution, which was super huge. But there's a movie called The Imitation Game about his life and his contribution to World War II. Anyways, in his later life, people found out that he was gay, and that was illegal during the time in England. So then he was offered either to take hormone therapy or go to prison for 2 years. So of course he took the hormone therapy.
He died because of that?
No, because he had this record, as a criminal, I guess. Oh, and back then being gay was called gross indecency, which was super weird. Anyways, he could not work as a code breaker anymore for the government because of course he has record. So he did his own research. And before he died, he also like published a lot of papers that people didn't really understand at that time. And he died because he committed suicide. But there are some controversies about this. There are people saying that maybe someone murdered him, or it was an accident, because I think it was because he inhaled some type of powder that was poisonous that caused him to die. And it could have been people murdering him because he did have the like classified information for World War II because he worked for the government. And yeah, so after 55 years, Queen Elizabeth II gave him a royal pardon, which means that he is not a criminal anymore. People memorialized him and gave him his justice for what he did for their country. If you still haven't heard of Alan Turing after all that explanation, he later became known as the father of computers, and he is the very first person to create computers, which is the machine to decode Enigma machine.
Wow, that's crazy.
I actually thought of him because I was watching The Imitation Game the other day, and I thought that his contribution is so huge, and all of our cell phones and computers come from him, and we should really honor him. Yeah. Okay, so this next story is about Mary Jackson.
Who's that?
She is the first colored woman to work in NASA. She lived from 1921 to 2005. Her early life she started off as also very talented in math and science. She knew that she was smart and she was skipping grades and, ending school earlier than others. She wanted to be like a mathematician researcher, but then she went on and became a math teacher at first and slowly worked her way up to NASA.
Oh, is it like the Hidden Figure?
Yes, she's one of the characters in Hidden Figures.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you guys could also go watch that movie about them, which was really interesting and touching for me, I think. Okay, anyways, Jackson, she helped with an experiment in a high-speed wind tunnel in NASA and, trained her as an engineer. But, at that time, there was still segregation going on. She had to, have her own bathroom and stuff. I mean, eventually she became an aerospace engineer for about 20 years. A lot of the launchings worked because of her work.
Like we see in the movie.
Right. Because she had to have a graduate degree, she had to work during the day and take night classes for physics and math. But that school has never had colored women go there before. So she was the very first colored woman to study at that school as well. And of course, her contributions were huge and received great recognition for her work. Presidents have awarded her, and yeah, she got the recognition that she was supposed to get.
Definitely.
After the break, we're going to move on to Momofuku Ando.
Welcome back. Now, we're going to talk about Momofuku Ando and his success stories.
So, he is a Japanese Taiwanese born on March 5th, 1910 and died on January 5th, 2007. His family background was that they owned a textile company that was in Taiwan, I think in Jiayi. But his parents died and he started his own textile company. However, that went into bankruptcy. After the war, his contribution started right after the World War II, after the atomic bombs. Even after a few years that the World War II have ended, those places that were dropped by those bombs were still in ruins. And, a lot of people were still poor and they didn't have homes and didn't have enough food. They were fed by the government with bread, which was provided by the Americans. Of course, they didn't like that very much. And they wanted, noodles and ramen, which is one of their favorite food. So Momofuku Ando saw this situation, he saw that people were lining up for like a little shop that was selling ramen for very high prices. And those were for, people who had a little bit more money. For those who were poor, they had to like eat grass and things that weren't really edible for people. So then he thought that everyone should be enjoying ramen. Everyone should be eating the food that they want to eat during this, national little breakdown. They want to have something that symbolized their nation. And I quote him, he said, "The world is peaceful only when the people have enough to eat." So then he started this company called Nissin.
Oh, it's him?
Yes, I know, right?
Oh, okay. Then I know who that is.
I know. I didn't know that was his name at first as well, but looking at this company,
I know the company.
I know. This company started as a salt company, but it failed. And one thing that he still remembered, like after 10 years, was that people were still starving, lining up for really long lines during winter, shivering, and couldn't get actually enough food to eat for really high prices. So he thought that he wanted to make something. He wanted to make ramen that everyone could enjoy at low prices and tastes good. So he started to experiment with different things, like different ratios of flour, salt, like stuff like that. And in the end, he finally got instant noodles. So he started to sell them, and it became like a nationwide famous food. And of course, it started to export to other countries as well. And now Nissin is a famous instant noodle company, and which still exists now. Okay, so this last story, I just feel like I wanted to bring in my parents for success stories. I wouldn't say that they're super famous as these three people that I've mentioned in this episode, but I feel like like the last episode, we talked about neurodefinitions, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Talking how success is doing their best, and how as long as you achieve something that you think is great, then you're successful. So my parents, they started off like as the lower class of the society, working in factories, or that's my mom, working in factories. And my dad would be, doing like plumbing jobs or fixing elevators with his dad, which is my grandpa. So then, of course, my dad is an entrepreneur, so he has his own company. And I feel like he's super successful because I have other 3 siblings, and we're all able to attend college, and that like high education that my parents were not able to get. And I think that my dad is able to support our family and, have enough wealth for us to have higher education than others is something that is very like amazing.
Right.
Considering that they started off as people who didn't have anything. Yeah, so although they're not like the most successful people that people see on TVs or, in history books and stuff, I think that I would still consider them as successful. So this brings us to a point thinking that actually the most successful people don't actually have to be famous people. I read this article about successful people not being the most famous people. So it's kind of saying that the lucky ones are the hidden figures because, they don't have to like suffer the burdens of the public, or, the anxiety of having a good status, like keeping no scandals or controversies and stuff like that. And those are like really the successful people that are able to live a good life, and rather than those famous people.
Right, of course. Like what we talked about in the previous episode, like how people define success differently, and how some people think they're successful, but they don't think that the society thinks they're successful.
Mm-hmm.
It really kind of comes down to whether you think you're successful or not, in a way. Because a lot of people that are really smart, really talented, they're not famous.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really hard to be famous, and it's really hard to kind of like, I'd say, stand out, even though you are super talented.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there are just so many people in the world, and it's not necessarily easy to make people see you, and sometimes it needs a little luck.
Right.
I just think that there are a lot of unsung heroes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like Aaron Turing, he literally invented the thing that we use the most today. So I guess what you said is like pretty true. Like successful people doesn't need to be famous.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel.
Also, comment down below if you have any thoughts. You could click on the bell to get notified when we upload a new video as well.
Thank you and bye.